Welcome. I'm Dr. Patrice Berry, and here I share educational resources on a variety of topics. And today we're talking about should therapists be influencers? So let's hop right into the intro. All right. So this has been a bit of a hot topic, especially over on TikTok, because there is someone there who is saying they're doing therapy. And there have also been multiple articles that have come out on this topic. And I'm going to cover two of those today. If you have any other resources that you would like for me to share or cover, please let me know. I'm also super grateful because I got a few comments before this came up and I am going to review those during the stream. I'm also live over here on TikTok. And so if you might see me looking over here, and that's why. But the question is it ethical for therapists to be influencers? And I think we first have to define what is an influencer and what does the person mean by that term. I call myself a content creator, and I think there's some negative stigma associated with the word influencer. And if we're just talking about somebody who shares their influence, somebody that shares their knowledge, I think that's different versus there are some therapists that supposedly are using client information in their TikToks or in their social media, and that could cross a line. And every board, so every therapist is held accountable by their licensing board, and their board gets to say what's okay for therapists and what's not okay. And many boards are really behind when it comes to social media. Often the people over the boards, I don't know how active they are on social media, but really therapists being on social media using it to educate, because I think there's a lot of good that can come from therapists sharing online, and then there are also some ethical considerations that I think it's really important to know. And then if you're a client, so if you're a client and you have an issue with this and something comes up with your therapist, I like to talk with you all about ways that you can bring it up with your therapist. And so social media is a powerful tool, and this is where we share our thoughts, opinions, and experiences. And therapists are on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and we're often sharing our insights and advice. I'm a licensed psychologist, and my board has certain recommendations around, so of course, not sharing confidential information that clients, the same way I wouldn't share any HIPAA information, that the therapy place, that it gets to stay confidential. And I think it's really important that it be confidential because that's how safety is established. And that's why I can't do therapy on a live or in these public forums, because therapy is meant to be this safe space. And I do hope that it stays that way. Group therapy is different, but you still wouldn't have a group therapy session on a public platform because you don't get to control who's seeing the information and who's sharing. Because within a therapeutic relationship, there's this understanding that the therapist is taking care of the client, that they're managing, that they're responsible for certain aspects of the client's care. And then they're also responsible for referring that client if they ever do need to refer them out for any additional services or anything like that. But once again, I think that while some people can say that sharing this information can be incredibly helpful, I do think that as you start to reach a wider audience, we just have to be careful. So we have to be careful that the information that we share is accurate. We have to be careful that we are reducing stigma. So I saw a video recently where people perceived that the therapist was making light of a mental health diagnosis, and that can often cause really big reactions. And so if you search like the news section for therapists, particularly on TikTok, I don't know why, but there have been therapists that have been called out by the community, or they've received a lot of not good, like, yeah, a lot of negative attention because of something that was taken the wrong way. And if I see something that I think is not appropriate, or but that could be ethically a concern, I would first try to direct message that individual, because I think calling people out publicly, now everybody does it different. And so this is how I would do it. And then there are people that, hey, I'm going to stitch this video, I'm going to duet it, and I'm going to say, like, you need to take a step back and look at this differently, because we do try to do this in an indirect way. But if I'm the client and I feel that my therapist has done something wrong, there are ways that I can address that with that particular therapist. And so, some of the ethical boundaries that we watch, the first one is going to be confidentiality, that what's said in session. So, so if I just had one client that talked about grief, I would not immediately get on social media and make a video on grief. I have had clients ask me to make a specific video, and I normally don't tag that. So I would never, I would never ever tag a client in it. And they never comment publicly asking me certain questions. So that's always something that comes into our individual session. But and if you want to scare your therapist a little bit, and if they are on social media, you can ask them, you can say, like, hey, I saw your video. Your video came up on my feed, and then don't say anything else. Because often we're going to be like, I wonder what you saw. Like, what video did you see? But I think being able to know that as the client, it is our job. So, as a therapist, as a psychologist, it is my job to create that safe space for a client. And if I was in their shoes, I would not want my therapist, if I showed up 5 minutes late and then my therapist went on social media talking about clients being late. I would think, I wonder if that has anything to do with me. Now, there have been times when I've had multiple clients, and I've been talking about parenting with multiple cases and multiple clients, where sometimes I might have done a general parenting topic, but it was never related to any specific thing. And if I did have a client come and say, like, hey, was it about me? Oh no, like, that was not about any one particular client. And if I did have a client come to me and say, like, hey, I'm not comfortable with this video, because maintaining that client relationship, that is my first job. So that is my main job. What I do on social media, what I do on here, that is just extra. So that's just to help provide general education to a community. Every therapist is different. So I don't use my social media to boost my private practice or to gain therapy clients. So I'm grateful, I'm thankful. I am fully booked with a long wait list. I don't go on social media to market my practice. There are therapists that do that, but they do it in a way, I think there is an ethical way to do that. Because one of the downsides of somebody finding me on social media is thinking that this is how I show up in session, when meeting one on one with a client is different than how I show up here on social media. And so I do think that sometimes it can give people the wrong idea. I just want to mention some of the comments that somebody mentioned, that being an influencer, so a therapist, pro- providing content online, that it can be a bit of a risky thing. And I think people do need to be careful. And Dr. Jessica Lee, so it's Jessica Lee Saidi, and I've linked one of her videos in the description on YouTube. But she has a whole series, she has a whole playlist on ethical considerations with social media. And then T, Becoming Unfiltered, talked about, don't know about the word influencer. And let's talk about Dr. Phil, because let's all know. So, Dr. Phil is not a licensed clinician. So when people go on his show, normally before the show and after the show, they meet with licensed people. So what Dr. Phil does, that is not therapy. He is not doing therapy up on the stage and in front of everybody. I recently watched a parent there was like this parenting show where they were trying, and there was a licensed therapist that was providing just general tips and general recommendations. And he was doing it from an educational perspective. But because he's not working one on one with any of those people, and it wasn't a therapy setting, he didn't give anyone, like, you shouldn't do that. He didn't give anyone individualized feedback. And so that's where I do think people do need to be careful when we're on social media. So I'm a recovering people pleaser. I talk about that. And with that, when somebody asks me a question, it's okay for me to say, I can't speak to your exact situation. I can't speak to exactly what you're going through. Yes. So Dr. Phil really is just a pure influencer. Like he is not licensed. he If he ever was licensed, I don't think it was for a very long time. But what he does is not therapy because people come in and they're like, oh, parent test. Yes, parent test. And that's a whole other video. If y'all want me to do my reaction to the parent test, let me know. I'm really happy for the person that won. But I think the way they set up the examples and the way voting went, I don't know. But I do think that being able to say that, yes, so I agree. I think he's more of an entertainer. And so I do edutainment. So when I'm on social media, my goal is to entertain and educate. But I don't say that this is therapy. Now, some people have said that my content is helpful, that resources and tools, that the things have been helpful, but I in no way made something that was specific to that one individual because doing so would place my license at risk. And I worked hard. So I went to school for a long time. I worked really hard. Like, I would not do that. And so let's review some of those articles that I was talking about before. So here's one that was on the Washington Post. It says, your therapist is on TikTok. Will your therapy session end up there too? And within this article, what they do is they actually talk about how some therapists are offering. So every therapy session has informed consent. And I guess some therapists are giving social media consent forms that give the therapist the right to use information from private sessions on their social media. And oh, that to me, that crosses a line because I would not work with a therapist that said I had to give them permission to use my personal information that I'm paying them for. So therapy is not free. Therapy, like, this is a paid relationship. And so if somebody was asking me to do that, I would not work with that person. And this was even on The View. I believe it was covered on The View. And there is a concern that because The View used two clips, and the clips that they used were therapists that don't engage in this. So as they were talking about therapists doing this, they played two therapists from TikTok that don't do this. And so those creators, specifically Kristen, not your average therapist, she definitely came out and spoke about that. But the American Psychological Association has some recommendations and guidelines. But once again, the APA, they just set guidelines. Your state licensing board is the one that says what's okay and what's not okay. And I do like the fact that being open and sharing things online, that it helps you be able to to talk about different things and different options and helps make therapy more accessible to people. But I do think that when we start to go down these paths, that it can cause some problems and some issues. And so this is another article, Help My Therapist as an Influencer. And it was written by, I think it was inspired by a New York producer who went to a therapist and figured out that they had an online following, and they felt that some of the information that they were sharing in session, that it was being used on the person's social media. And so, and the person, they didn't even bring it up, they didn't talk to them about it, they just stopped seeing them. And so I know that I and what this article did for me is it made me be more specific with my clients, like, "Hey, so I am on social media," because there's a percentage of my clients that don't know, and it's fine because clients, so the stuff I do on social media is not for my clients. I create general educational content to help educate the public, but I'm not doing anything for any one specific client. My work with clients is completely separate. And I really try to take care to maintain those boundaries. And so within my informed consent, it talks about that clients can follow me if they want, but I don't follow them back. Or that clients, they can't say that I'm their therapist, or because that opens them up. Like, it really is to protect them. It's not about me. And I'm glad that we're having these conversations because this is something that I think is going to continue to be an issue, especially as the boundaries and ethics of this, if it's not clear. But the thing I hope that they don't do is go so far to say that nobody should ever be on social, like that no therapist should ever make any content, because I think that's swinging too far. Because I do think there is an ethical way to do this that respects and maintains client boundaries and client safety, and then also just provides a way to help provide general education to the public. Because on social media there can be this, it can just help people be able to know that, like, okay, so this is how I find a therapist. Okay, so if I'm having an issue with this, these are some general tips. Because most of us Google. So I know when I have a problem. So if something's not working the way it's supposed to, I go to YouTube, I go to Google, and I'm like, okay, can somebody show me how to fix this? And I do think that sometimes for our mental health, that people are doing the same thing. And we want to have licensed people that are out there providing that are providing good information. Something that I'm excited about, and if there are any therapists that are watching that have YouTube content, because YouTube, there are certain creators that have applied for a health badge where you know that you're getting information from a licensed therapist, because they're actually checking the person's credentials. Because there have been a few situations where people said that they were licensed, or they didn't have the credentials, and they gained this huge following, and then it turns out that they didn't have the credentials that they said they had. And so I recently applied for that. I heard it takes a few months, and so we'll see what happens with that. But just knowing that you're getting information from valid sources. And that video that I linked, it is from Jessica Lee's PhD. I have this ID. She has a PhD. Jessica Lee PhD. And this video is amazing. I would show it, but there's music in the background, and the tubes does not like that. And so, but I have it linked down below, where she just talks about how it's so important that we have these ethical boundaries and that clients know. Because that's the thing. People, if I was reading that and I didn't know what therapy was supposed to look like, I would be like, oh, so am I supposed to let this person talk about my information on social media? Like, that doesn't feel right to me, but I guess, because I'm in the person's office, I need help. I'm looking for help. And often people don't read, every single, so make sure to read those disclosures. If you're in services with somebody, make sure to read what their disclosures and everything say. And then if you are using certain platforms, especially because there are like the better helps and things like that, make sure to check out their disclosure policies and what are they allowed to do with your information and what are they not allowed to do, and check out some of the articles and things that have come out there. But I do think that it's important that there be ethical voices that are giving good information, because so many people are hurting and it is hard to find a therapist. So right now my wait list is about 3 months, and I normally recommend that people they keep looking, and I tell them like, "Hey, I'll put you on my wait list, and if you don't find somebody, I'll be so happy if you find someone before it's time." And then there are times when it's just people just need some additional resources to supplement the therapy that they're doing or the other work. But I would have an issue, and I think it's okay if somebody did have an issue with their therapist sharing that type of information online. If you have additional questions or additional things that you would like for me to talk about or address, on Thursday, I am going to be talking about Kerry Washington's new show, Unprisoned. And so that stream is going to be at 8:30 p.m. Please join me for that. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.